It's just a minute gone past 4 o'clock, our starting time. It is my happy privilege to welcome you all to this presentation today. On behalf, of course, of myself and my colleague, who is actually leading the technical part of our presentation, Elder Eric Henry, we just want to assure you how delighted we are for being with you on this virtual platform for this presentation today. My name is Brighton Kavaloh, a minister of religion of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and also do serve as the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Director of our organization, the South England Conference. As I begin this presentation today, allow me to begin by passing, or rather paying, my tribute and appreciation to the marvelous and tireless work of the NHS workers. By that I mean the leadership and staff at all levels who have served us, the public, so well, particularly during this coronavirus pandemic period. And of course, this includes, I hasten to add, all the staff in the hospitals, care homes, and all other places that there. But I'm also mindful that this COVID-19 pandemic has sadly led to loss of lives, leaving in its pathway, leaving in its wake, bereaved families to mourn over the loss of loved ones and friends. I'm very mindful of that. Then we have those still hospitalized as I speak, receiving treatment up and down the country, possibly even around the world. And maybe even those who have been discharged, they are at home, however, still in the process of recovering fully, lest we forget them. With that preamble in mind, let me just invite you to bow your heads with me as we begin our presentation formally. Our Lord and our God, we invoke your presence in a very marked way on this virtual platform. Guide my thought process. Help us one and all that through this challenge of COVID-19, we still are passing through. May it serve as an opportunity not to be divisive, but to all unite with a common purpose of being there for one another, but more importantly, of being in communion with you. With this, we commend and commit ourselves to your guidance in this presentation today. In Jesus' name, amen. I would like at this point to share with you the screen. And once again, as I said, thank you so much for taking your precious time to be together. I would like my little case up there, if possible, if the technicians can help me. The case so that all right. Can I be helped with the case, please? Okay, the case. Thank you. That's better. That's better. Lovely. Right. Thank you. For those of you who will have been invited, most likely you'll have seen this flyer with the subject of our presentation today. Open government consultation, making vaccination a condition of deployment in the health and wider social care sector. This title really comes in the heels or behind another consultation we had lately. I've just shown you on the screen. The open consultation, making vaccination a condition of deployment in older adult care homes. This was published on the 14th of April, 2021. And I want you to see what it was seeking to accomplish. In the summary, it says, we are seeking your views, meaning the public, on a proposal to make COVID-19 vaccination a condition of employment in older adult care homes. It closed coming up to midnight on the 21st of May, 2021. This consultation, it's important for us all to know, particularly those who will be responding to the current one, as you'll soon discover, because the consultation is asking you to buy into this one partially. So you can't understand the one now, having not acquainted yourself to this one which has gone. Making vaccination a condition of deployment. It may sound diplomatic, but all it is saying, making as it were vaccination mandatory. It's what it is saying, mandatory. And indeed, those in the older adult care homes, now we know it is mandatory. It's a race against time. The countdown is started to the 11th of November, 2021. It will be mandatory that you have your 2 doses, or else you lose your job. So your current one, as you discover, is asking you to buy into this one, partially. I was a little bit surprised, to be frank with you, when I discovered a care worker who never even had heard of this consultation. All she was asked was, can you come and confirm that you have had your first dose? And it would seem to me she had not even taken part in this consultation, but it is now law. I can't emphasize enough. For those who would like to take part, please make sure that you access both consultations. One, just to reminisce or find out a little bit more. So this is what now been made to apply to those working in the older adult care homes. This slide you are seeing before you, that's where we are at now. More or less the same language, open consultation, making vaccination a condition of deployment in the health and wider, not just older care homes, but wider social care sector. A little over a week ago, it was published, 9th of September, 2021. As you will note, it will close where there is some shade highlighting this consultation, which is on now, possibly applicable to some of you on this platform. It will close on the 22nd of October, 2021, which is not a long time from now. So this is where we are at now. If we move forward, what is this current consultation asking you to do or seeking for you to do? Here again, where I have highlighted gives you a clue. And it's important for you to read and understand. Other than just from hearsay, a friend or a colleague said so, as much as possible, access and read through. The aim of this consultation is to seek views on whether or not the government should extend, mark the language, is not proposing to start another statutory requirement for this group, but to extend the existing statutory requirement, that which is applying to those who are working in the care homes. Extend it to what? For those working, of course, or volunteering in a care home to be vaccinated against coronavirus, COVID-19, extended to what? To other health and care settings. So it's a step up as a condition of deployment. So it will be using the mandatory vaccination as is in place right now for those working in the care home. They're seeking your view if you could accept that. But there is an addition to the extension. And in addition, whether to introduce a statutory requirement to be vaccinated against the flu as also a condition of deployment. You may say, what for? As a means to protect vulnerable people. Who would not warm up to that? Our vulnerable people, elderly people, disabled people, be protected. There are three things that are mentioned there, and make sure that you read. Protect them and to reduce transmission within health and social care premises, contribute to the protection of individuals who may have suboptimal response to their own immunizations, avoid disruption to services that provide their care. Those are the reasons they are asking you to buy into this consultation. Of course, just below, they're just, telling you how this will be really, this requirement will be in operation. Now, my intention in this presentation is not to go blow by blow, line by line through the consultation itself, no. But I've decided to pick out some very important issue in the consultation, to me, which is a principle and a key issue for you to consider. There are several areas that have been mentioned. I couldn't go through all of them. But what I'm sharing with you could give you a clue as you go through your answers. They must be well thought through responses. I've chosen 3 questions. As I said, they point to some issue I would like to know myself, whether to say, yes, I'll buy into this requirement of mandatory vaccination, or I won't. Now, those 3 questions, look at the first one. The first question, I took it straight from the consultation. It's asking you, thinking about circumstances in which staff fall within a requirement to be vaccinated. I highlighted that all it is meaning to be vaccinated by compulsory, within a requirement to be vaccinated, but remain unvaccinated. How do you anticipate you would respond? It's asking me that question. How would I respond? Then it's for me to say, you want to vaccinate me by mandatory, and you need my response. Obviously, they're there. How would you respond to those 4 areas? Redeploy unvaccinated staff, cease employment for unvaccinated staff, or other? Please specify, or not applicable. You'll see my response to you will fall in the 3rd. I will specify, and I will allow you possibly to guess as I'm going through, but at the very end, you will appreciate where I'm coming from. Another question that follows that on the same page. Another question is that one. Do you think a vaccination requirement policy could cause any conflict with the other statutory requirements that healthcare or social care providers must meet? Yes, no, I don't know, not applicable. Where I have highlighted, do you think vaccination requirement policy, what it all means, mandatory vaccination, could cause any conflict? Okay. Then the next, it says, please then give further detail on other statutory requirements that vaccination requirement policy, what they mean, mandatory vaccination, that's all they're saying, could conflict with, could you being forced to be vaccinated be in conflict with something, with other laws. Okay, I've taken those three. So I'll take you through a process now of law based on those now in the adult care homes. It's already a law. But if I bought into this, how I would see it, you would see it. What you are seeing before you, there are acts of Parliament. Public Health Control of Disease Act 1984, which really initially had to do with smallpox, and Coronavirus Act 2020. These two sections in the law deal with medical treatment. Being treated by either vaccination or by medicine, prophylactic treatment. This law is a primary legislation. And as I go through, I want you to bear that in mind. These are brought about by the Act of Parliament. As you can see, citations may be slightly different, but they are one and the same. What do they mean? I will go into detail further down the road. But all they mean is that you cannot be forced treatment. There is no mandatory vaccination or mandatory treatment. These are primary laws right now in existence. Nothing has changed. But of course, something has changed. Has it? Yes, it has. For the first time, those working in the adult care homes are going to be forced to be vaccinated, or else lose their jobs. It will be a mandatory vaccination. Your deployment depends on being vaccinated. Yes, the law has changed for those working in the adult care homes, and those a step higher, it's in the making. So already you should look at those laws which says treatment, unless you are, shall I say, a minor or mentally ill or an elderly person, you need possibly assistance. But when you are in your own right mind, there's nothing wrong with you. You can only be treated by consent. Those are the laws in the land. But they've slightly changed for those working in the adult care homes. Now, with that said, I want to take you to this particular slide. What you are seeing before you was last year when we were just coming out of the first lockdown. The UK Human Rights Joint Select Committee put out there to the public, they wanted a response from the public pertaining to how Corona, how the government responded to the coronavirus, particularly with the human rights in mind. I have a copy that is in Parliament, which they accepted as my written evidence. But I liked so much this particular one. I would like to refer to you. It's important. Restrictions of liberty in public health, medical treatment, and human rights in the COVID-19 pandemic. You heard the question earlier on. The consultation is asking you, how do you feel about this mandatory vaccination? Could it be in conflict with something you may have in mind? Okay. These people, I want you to see the three doctors. They describe themselves. They were part of the witnesses to respond to how the government was able to handle the coronavirus with human rights implications. How did we fare as we were coming out of the first lockdown, 2020? This is how they began. We are a group of academics with expertise in medical ethics and law. And we have recently published legal analysis of the emergency coronavirus legislation in peer-reviewed academic journals. We are submitting this evidence, not because our research in this area has enabled us to identify key areas in this legislation that raise human rights issues. Everyone on the platform mark that. Okay. And to develop 3 key recommendations for ensuring that liberty restricting measures taken by the government to address the COVID-19 pandemic are human rights compliant. Further down, which is even more important, they come up with this: compulsory vaccination for COVID-19 and human rights law. Going to the 2 sets of primary legislation I showed you at the beginning, this is what they are addressing now. Those academics say, neither the Coronavirus Act 2020, which is currently in operation, nor the Public Health Act 1984, you also saw it's in operation, grant the executive power to mandate vaccination. The current law does not give any Secretary of State the power to mandate vaccination. It is important that you should know that. So it is important for you to know that. Indeed, Section 45E of the Public Health Act 1984 and Schedules 18 and 19 of the Coronavirus Act rule out, please mark that, rule out provisions requiring medical treatment, including vaccination or other prophylactic treatment. And then they go back at the bottom. You see them? a policy of compulsory vaccination would thus require primary legislation. Anyone listening to me, mark that. The current law has not granted the local council, the government, or one individual to change the law. It will need full parliament. A policy of compulsory vaccination, if you should mandate that, must require primary legislation, not secondary legislation. I'll come to that. Oh, but they're not alone in dealing with this. If you come to that, last year, Friday, 1st May 2020, Louise Hooper, a lead barrister in other areas, but definitely in human rights, wrote this article that thrilled lawyers and many others. She asked, Coronavirus Act 2020, does it permit mandatory vaccinations? You may say, but why am I bringing this? I'm bringing this because right now, those in the staff in the old care homes are being mandated to be vaccinated. And right now there's a consultation that someone like you and me should respond to be vaccinated by compulsory. So what's going on? So you should be able to work out who is saying what to help you answer sensibly to the consultation. Okay, she's asking, does it permit mandatory vaccinations? Her conclusion, Louise Hope of Guarded Court Chambers, it is clear that mandatory medical treatment and vaccination are explicitly prohibited by the Act, what we read earlier, prohibited explicitly. Then she goes on. There is, however, potential for abuse leading to infringement of civil liberties and human rights. Unless the powers contained in the Coronavirus Act are exercised lawfully. She's almost anticipating that there could be an abuse and infringement of people's civil liberties unless someone watching that the coronavirus provisions are exercised lawfully and not illegally. Of course, she goes on to comment how important the areas of being reasonable, proportionate, and necessary, which are also highlighted in the instruments. This brings me to something as we move on, the importance of the rule of law. Dawkins' Law, Empire, 1998, page 9. By the way, Dawkins, albeit an American, but he was a constitutional expert, a renowned one. He spent some years writing in England, in the UK. He worked at University College, University of London, and at Oxford, highly regarded. This is what many have cited. Let me read it to you. The rule of law requires that state cohesion. If you will force somebody, if the state will force somebody, shall always be backed by law. The legal aspect must be tested. Goes on. The state's force must not be used or withheld, no matter how useful that would be to the ends in view, no matter how beneficial those ends. In other words, what he's saying, you can't say, now let me break the law and mandate this because someone else is suffering. This is suffering. We're all running the place. So we must, even in an emergency, the rule of law must be applicable. Don't press a panic button at the expense of the rule of law. Except as licensed, there'll be occasions you'll be licensed, except as licensed or required by, that is, valid legislation, very interesting, or decisions of the courts having the effect of making law. Very interesting. There will be times you are given that opportunity, but it must be valid legislation. And therefore, I would like to come with that in mind. I would like to come. You remember, the current consultation is asking you and me to buy into the one which was used in the older care homes. You remember, I took 3 areas where they are asking for mandatory vaccination. And for right reasons. Our elderly folk must be protected and the environment must be right. No one can argue against that. But as you just heard earlier on, even if the situation is dire, it must follow the rule of law. Now, then I say to myself, COVID-19 mandatory vaccination in the old care homes, which is almost in operation, and I'm being asked to buy into myself, it's being extended to me. Was it valid? Yes or no? Because you cannot just buy into something now when that reference you don't know much about. What I mean is simply this. The older care homes has a stipulation now. If it is being extended to me, I would want to know how and what has happened to bring it about. And that may just persuade me to buy into it or to say, hang on, that decision is left, obviously, to each individual, as it were. Now, I would like to quickly take you to the laws over the older care home stipulation. Tuesday, 20th of July this year, because on the Tuesday, 20th of July, sorry, I'm having some disturbances. Yeah, Tuesday, 20th of July, the House of Lords, please, where the red, the House of Lords raised concerns regarding regulations on mandatory vaccines for care homes on Tuesday, 20th July this year. I say, hang on. it's being extended to me now in this consultation. How did it fare just a couple months ago? I repeat, the House of Lords raised concerns regarding regulations on mandatory vaccines for care home staff on Tuesday, 20th July. The House debated a motion of regret. Of what? Of regret in relation to regulations on mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations for care home staff. At the bottom, care home staff vaccination. The motion put forward by Baroness Wheeler, Labour, regrets that the operational guidance for the mandatory care home staff vaccination will not be available until the end of July. There was an operational issue, among other things, that they talked about. Okay, so what happened? I want you to see in the House of Lords, the Health and Social Care Act 2008, Regulated Activities Amendment, Coronavirus Regulations 2021. That is the law that was amended to make it mandatory. So when it now is applicable to the older adult homes being considered for now, it's now being was being looked into with some amendments to follow. This, by the way, in the House of Lords. I want you to see quickly what transpired. Okay, the chairperson will just introduce it first.
My Lords, the hybrid sitting of the House will now resume. Motion to approve the Health and Social Care Act 2008, Regulated Activities Amendment Coronavirus Regulations 2021. The time limit is 1.5 hours. Lord Bethell.
Indeed, as that was introduced, Lord Bethell, the Parliamentary Undersecretary in the Department of Health and Social Care, provided a move for consideration of the act. I must say that listening to him, he provided a good case for the government, as expected. The issue of adult care homes and their vulnerability, very, very persuasive indeed. Then came Baroness Wheeler, who was bringing a challenge or an amendment to it. An amendment to the motion moved by Baroness Wheeler. She too made a case, but brought up some reservations about the act. Obviously, I was not able to listen to all of them, but a few I listened to, each was persuasive. But the ones I'm going to show you is the debate, possibly the majority and the public is not so much aware of. I'm bringing this because that side must also be heard and be known. Now, I would like to take two. The first one is Baroness Knox, Conservative. She stood up at about 7:05. Let me read it in your hearing. My lords, whether or not noble lords agree with the intent behind this statutory instrument, they ought to share my deep sense of outrage at how Parliament is being treated. We have become inured to the cavalier way in which the Department of Health and Social Care uses secondary legislation, not primary, secondary legislation, to interfere with citizens' lives. But this instrument reaches a new law. For the first time since the Victorian era, vaccination will be mandated by law. I believe in red. I believe that it is wholly inappropriate to use an amendable secondary legislation to cross that line. So she's indicating something has been used, which is a secondary legislation. But look to how she ends in blue, in blue rather, yes. According to her, it raises deep issues of civil liberties. You heard it from Louise. You heard it from the academics. This thing keeps on coming. It's not going to go. You must also know this side of the story. It raises deep issues of civil liberties and human rights. And it should have been fully scrutinized in a primary legislation. I want you to now listen to her attentively live.
My lords, whether or not noble lords agree with the intent behind this statutory instrument, they ought to share with me a deep sense of outrage at how Parliament is being treated. We become inured to the cavalier way in which the Department of Health and Social Care uses secondary legislation to interfere with citizens' lives, but this instrument reaches a new low. For the first time since the Victorian era, vaccination will be mandated by law. I believe it is wholly inappropriate to use unamendable secondary legislation to cross that line. It raises deep issues of civil liberties and human rights and should have been fully scrutinised in primary legislation. Furthermore, the Department's contempt for Parliament is demonstrated by the lack of accompanying operational detail or an impact assessment, as has been pointed out. The Department has doggedly resisted releasing full impact statements on COVID orders. Whenever possible, it has hidden behind the small print of Cabinet Office rules on impact assessments to claim that they are not required. The small print does not cover today's statutory instrument, and so the Department has instead resorted to, and there is no easy way of saying this, lying. The explanatory note and the explanatory memorandum state that a full impact assessment has been prepared and is available. The Minister in the other place last week admitted that it has not even been prepared. As we heard last night, a flimsy document called an impact statement appeared on the website, but this falls far short of an impact assessment. And an impact assessment published after Parliament has considered an instrument does nothing to contribute to parliamentary scrutiny. The Department has rightly drawn the condemnation of the Secondary Legislation Scrutiny Committee of your Lordship's House, which recommended in its 8th report on the instrument that consideration be delayed until both the detailed impact assessment and operational guidance were available. And yesterday's 10th report emphasise the many questions left unanswered. The department has cocked a snook at Parliament by ramming this instrument through now. Allowing proper parliamentary debate in September would do nothing to delay the implementation of the policy. It already has a 16-week implementation gap built into it. The consultation showed that more people opposed the policy than supported it. Unison does not support it. The government cannot claim that they are acting in uncontroversial territory. And I suspect that the real truth is that this policy would never survive the scrutiny that a fully informed debate would bring. It's also far from clear that the policy solution is the right one. As the Minister pointed out, 96% of residents of older care homes and 92% in working age adult care homes have had a first vaccination dose, with the figures for staff being 86% and 83%. And these are well in excess of the SAGE guidelines of 90% for residents and 80% for staff. So in aggregate, there is no problem. Now, the Minister has said that only 65% of older age care homes were meeting the guideline, falling to 44% in London, though he gave no figures for the 2/3 of care homes that are in the sector which cater for working age adults. Now, these limited data do not provide support for the intrusive rules in this order. Rather, they speak to the need for more targeted interventions on a local basis and with smaller care homes in order to level them up to achieve the very great achievements that have been achieved so far at national level. My Lords, none of this is explored because we have no impact assessment, in particular in relation to care home staffing. Last night's impact statement came up with a central estimate of a one-off cost of £100 million in respect to the recruitment of 40,000 staff lost because of the instrument. But I do not think that that estimate will itself stand up to much scrutiny. If some staff decide not to be vaccinated, which is entirely their right to do, they will be forced out of employment in the sector. But the government have no evidence presented that there are people willing and able to come into the sector to replace that large number of people going out of it. There is no excess capacity in the market for care home staff, as many care home operators will testify. The impact of the loss of care home capacity is simply not addressed in the impact statement, along with a host of other consequential issues. My Lords, while I agree with the Noble Baroness Lady Wheeler's motion, I shall not be voting for it this evening because it is a mere gesture and it does not defend the role of Parliament. But neither shall I vote for the government.
Okay, if you heard her, she's going to abstain because, in fact, even that amendment could be disregarded, but it provided at least some talking point in the House of Lords. It would seem that's what she's alluding to. Let us go further up.
My Lords, whether or not Noble Lords agree with the intent.
Okay, sorry. I would like us to go to the another one. I've picked this because of the area I would like to emphasize. At 7:23, this is Baroness Foster of Oxton, a Conservative as well. Let me read it to you, at least something that she wrote, where I've highlighted. I'm a great supporter of the vaccines, but I will not support coercion or anyone being forced to have it to keep their job or feed their family. This debate is now moving away from the public health and into the realms of state control. The goalposts move daily. The public and businesses have no idea what is happening next. Contradictions abound. I want you to listen here, line of reasoning as well. Okay. Can someone close?
My Lords,
Yeah.
on my election to the European Parliament more than 20 years ago, it became clear early on that the Commission, or the Executive, wielded great power. There were no business impact assessments, despite our enacting primary legislation, and they weren't keen to change the status quo. But some of us were, and eventually they gave way, albeit reluctantly. But the battles continued, as they'd never admit that they were wrong. And as for us, the politicians, a little courage and fortitude to hold your ground is it's very difficult, but it's so much easier just to give in. But the EU sought more and more centralising powers, and it aimed to micromanage every element of our lives. So we left, quite literally. When the vaccine debacle blew up last year, it summed up why we'd had to go. We wanted to take back control. Well, most of us did anyway. I do not underestimate the challenges in making the most difficult decisions which the ministers have had to make. And initially, the British people wholeheartedly supported the actions that were taken. The vaccine was and is the silver bullet, and we all bought into it. But the hand of the state, in my view, is now riding roughshod over the will of the people, still controlling everything we do and how we're allowed to think. If you question, for example, say, a lockdown or a mask, you're accused of wanting to let rip. Not my words. If you actually publicly disagree, you're normally too stupid to understand. And if you actually demonstrate, well, obviously you're an anarchist, which the majority plainly are not. So when ministers turn up to a dispatch box, hiding behind the 2020 Emergency Powers Act, without a full business impact assessment, wishing to broaden the scope, without consultation, it is a step too far. I am a great supporter of the vaccines, but I will not support coercing or anyone being forced to have it in order to keep their job or feed their family. This debate is now moving away from public health and into the realms of state control. The goalposts move daily. The public and businesses have no idea what's happening next. Contradictions abound. Pinggate, as it's called, is causing chaos. It was always advisory, but the public were deliberately kept in the dark. Thousands of workers and children have been self-isolating who are fit and well, 500,000 last week. Test and trace is all over the place. And forcibly testing school children with no symptoms, in my view, has been an outrage. And so to holidays. The announcement. The minister decides France is now in Amber Plus, despite the fact the beta variant is in Réunion, which is 6,000 miles away. It's a bit like a new Foxtrot variant emerging in the Falklands. Portugal went back to Amber, naturally post the Champions League. And the Balearics, well, that's where all the families go, and that's in Amber too. But not if it's a pilot. Concerts in Liverpool 3 months ago, Royal Ascot, Wimbledon, Wembley, no distancing, no masks, no spikes, not dangerous. Which brings me to SAGE. 366 members sit on 10 working groups and committees, 18 of whom remain anonymous. And I do not question their integrity. Unelected, wielding powers which affect our freedoms and movement and association with people. And it beats me how they'd ever agree, but they don't really, because different medics and scientists contradict their colleagues on mainstream media every day, and normally those appearing to want to wallow in bad news. The behavioural clinicians admitted that they'd used scare tactics and propaganda to make the public comply, terrified, more like it. So here we are, 18 months down the line. Ministers and politicians cannot continue to hide behind the science, advisors, focus groups, and opinion polls. It's about being accountable and transparent and bold. Can you imagine a Thatcher government, or the likes of Lords Clark, Tebbit, Lamont, Lillian, Forsyth, and many others in this House, not rigorously challenging the advice? So in conclusion, my lords, no one gave any government the authority to take away the civil rights which we earned over centuries. We fought for them and we died for them. And no government can demand respect. They have to earn it. So we, the people, will take back control. We will get back to normal. And so it behoves the minister, along with his colleagues, to make sure that happens. And finally, my lords, it gives me no pleasure to speak out against my own government, but in my view, to remain silent today would have been remiss of me.
Now call Baroness Bennett of Manor Castle of Oxford.
If you could help me, I'm trying to.
Of Oxford.
Okay, thank you. At that point, after she spoke, Baroness Wheeler, who had provided the amendment, came back, but before her it was Lord Bethel, the Undersecretary of State in the department, gave his closing remarks, as I said, persuasive. So did Baroness Wheeler, her closing remarks. But I want you to note where I have shaded. Possibly, let me just read. Noble lords raised many points, and I fear there is just not time. Please mark that. Secondary legislation does not provide much time for scrutiny. This has been the complaint of many. Much is hurried through. Now to respond to them. Orbit, she went on. Overall, this SI, statutory instrument, remains an incoherent, muddled, and confused piece of legislation. And further, last-minute information and reassurances from the government have not made it any clearer or dealt with the key issues that need to be addressed. She closed. I wish to test the opinion of the House, what they think of this debate today. If I could, it was okay. When it came to the vote, that's what division counted remotely on Baroness Wheeler's amendment, 221 to 211. Baroness Wheeler's amendment was agreed, that something was not just right, but let it go. The motion was agreed. And very quickly, the House of Lords also engaged secondary legislation scrutiny committee to look into this issue. And this is what they came up with. Consultation analysis. If I should read, because of the time, where I highlighted blue. Because of the inconsistencies, the committee said this indicates that a significant number of people take the view that the policy is contrary to the European Convention on Human Rights. On the ground, they say that it infringes their bodily autonomy or is contrary to their beliefs. We have, for Example, received a submission from the Christian Science Committee on publication 9, which says that vaccination is an individual choice and the impositions of it threatens the operation of the registered care homes that they run according to their beliefs. I think it was a church run, whatever. Although the EM, that's the explanatory memorandum, contains the standard ministerial statement, although what they read from the government statement, that this legislation is compatible with convention. So the government defended itself, no, we are using convention. Okay. We would have expected, that is the committee, we would have expected Department for Health and Social Care to have provided stronger supporting evidence, and in particular, its response to the human rights issues raised in the response to the consultation. So the consultation, the human rights, when they queried, did not receive to their satisfaction. And that was the committee, you know. Very interesting. You will see at the bottom, they came back. Let me take item 41. Department for Health and Social Care has laid this instrument with neither. Whatever they provided was neither satisfactory. This information and the operational guidance are crucial to the House's understanding of how the policy underlying these regulations will work for both individuals and on sector-wide basis. Without them, effective parliamentary scrutiny is impossible. So whatever they were submitted was not enough to do justice to that scrutiny. What did they say in blue? We, therefore, that committee, recommend that the debate on the instrument, on what they were working for to reinforce mandatory in the older care home, should be deferred until they are made available. I'm not so sure, possibly they were able to hand them over, no wonder it is a law, whatever happens, I don't know. But you can see the committee itself says, let there be a pause. Let us get something to really put our teeth into this. Let us not be in any rush. As I said, they may have been given. So going back, this is the law we're talking about in UK. Primary legislation, you heard those people. But as you saw, we are where we are because of secondary. So the question, was it valid? The government says, no, it could be convention. Okay. Let us move on. I would like to come now to the area that, having listened, this was my own now analysis. Remember, like someone else out there, I'm being asked I should buy into the mandatory law of the old adult care home. Those who are working the out get 2 jobs or else lose your job. Those who are on the consultation a layer above must buy, they're seeking of you to buy into that. So I'm making my own analysis. All this, it could be tedious, but my own analysis. Is the way they went about it right or not? From what even I've listened. Now, you look to your left, primary legislation. That law says it objects mandatory. Are you with me? Mandatory vaccination. But to your right, the Health Protection Coronavirus Regulations 2020 is secondary legislation or derogatory legislation, because Parliament, the same Parliament, has given the Secretary of State the power to make regulations if there was a need for them. Okay. In this case, in red, these regulations are made in response to the serious and imminent threat to public health, which is posed by the incidence and spread of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus. So the Secretary of State has been given the powers to move in to reduce the spread of infection. But if you go at the very top, and I've highlighted, there are specific areas that he has been given that leeway. Bear with me, the first paragraph. The Secretary of State makes the following regulations in exercise of the powers conferred by sections. Look now, 45C, 13C, 4D, 45F2, 45P of the Public Health Control of Disease. There is no 45E. If you look to medical treatment on your left, 45E is not on your right on secondary legislation. Could it be, no wonder those people you heard are saying no executive has been given the power. In other words, if mandatory had to be used, it must come through the Act of Parliament, the Parliament in its full stretch, not giving one individual to make the law. My interpretation. Obviously, you could see we all have the article, the right to life. We must be protected. And indeed, how true. Because let me tell you, to lead sometimes can be difficult. Because if the government does not step in to deal with an emergency, we will complain. We are the first people to complain. If they rein in, we complain. So the government has to do something, but here it would seem it is given some powers. For instance, Article 8, you will see the right to respect for private and family life. During this pandemic, we were told to remain in bubbles, not to meet even some of our loved ones. Those were derogatory powers given to the minister in order to kind of restrict the spread of infection. Article 11, freedom of assembly and association. We went into lockdown. Those powers are given. But you will see there is no 45E there. Let me move possibly even much quick to prove my point. If you look at that, that is the Public Health Control of Disease Act, okay? 45A, it has to do with infection or contamination, dealing with significant harm to health. You will see 45B, 1, health protection regulations, international travel. As you travel, the appropriate minister may, by regulations, make provision. Yeah, he's been given those powers, right? Next, 45C, health protection regulation, domestic, in other words, in the country. 1, the appropriate minister, the appropriate minister may, by regulations, make provisions for the purpose of preventing, protecting against, controlling, or providing a public health response to contain, the situation. If you come where I have blue, the blue, 45C blue, imposing or enabling the imposition of restrictions or requirements on or in relation to persons, things, or premises in the event or in response to or a threat to public health. 4, requirement that a child is to be kept away from school, a prohibition, the events be a prohibition of or restriction relating to the holding of an event or gathering. You remember all those restrictions for a period? Oh, yes. The Secretary of State, 45C, has those powers so that the spread of infection is limited, but no mention of vaccination. B does not mention. C does not mention. Next, 45D. It says, whether even those powers given at 45C, they must be proportionate. Very interesting. Even the minister must be guided by proportionality. Then 45F, 45D, as I said. Then F, same thing. There's no mention of vaccination. 45P, those have been highlighted, have not been mentioned. But then when you come to Coronavirus Act 2020 and Virus Act 2020, look, medical treatment. 3, regulations under paragraph 11 may not include provision requiring a person to undergo medical treatment. And medical treatment includes vaccination. That's an absolute right Parliament has given to itself. On my right, a qualified right during an emergency for the Secretary of State to move in. So no job, you remember, for those in the older care homes. If I move very quickly, the proposal was used in Regulation 12 of the Health and Social Care Act, and they were plain and straight to say they will use that secondary legislation. The proposal is to amend in yellow. The proposal is to amend Regulation 12 to include vaccination requirements. So that act was amended as a secondary legislation. That's where we are at. That is where those who work in the care homes are being led by. So the Health and Social Care Act 2000, which earlier did not have vaccination. No, we can say it didn't have. Safe care and treatment. 12, care and treatment must be provided in a safe way for service users. Then H, assessing the risk of and preventing, detecting, and controlling the spread of infections includes those that are healthcare associated. So in H now is vaccination that has been put in there. Okay, and if you don't work for the health and social care, at least for now, that does not apply to you, but those in the old care homes. Okay, right. As I come just gradually to a conclusion, I want you to watch a video by David Davis. Most of you will know, a seasoned politician, in my view. At one time, he was the Brexit secretary, a man of experience. I want you just to watch, because there are very important things that he highlighted as well. If I could access it.
Now, the reasons against passport, there are many, but let me pick off a few. A domestic passport. Let me pick off a few. Firstly, the impact of this would be discriminatory. Under the law, it will be indirectly discriminatory, and that is illegal. You may well find it has been said that black and ethnic minority communities are less inclined to get vaccinated. Well, that would be an indirect discrimination. Okay. You've heard. Now, the reasons against a passport, there are many, but that would be an indirect.
Really, his line of reasoning is that mandatory vaccination will be an indirect discrimination and illegal. The service provider who provides a provision, a criterion, a practice to a service user. I want to be understood. So you have a provider and a service user. A provider, the government, a service user, the public. A criterion, well, mandatory vaccination. That really must be seen against the backdrop of what is called an objective justification test. Is what is being offered objective and justified? And that test comes under what is called a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. As I really come to a close, I want to believe, other than allowing these to enter into law courts, can't we possibly, as a people, really make use of that word proportionate? What do I mean? We have two competing systems here. Those who want to be vaccinated and those who don't want to be vaccinated. Instead of coming possibly hard on one at the expense of the other. The legitimate aim is to help each other to contain the spread of infection. Can't we have a balanced view? That is, find a way, those for, those against, to use a proportionate, objective means that this thing is better served, is better confronted by all of us working together than them and us. Something to think about. I'm still laboring with that myself. Why I bring that, you'll see in another, public administration and the Constitutional Affairs Committee, there was evidence that was brought forth by some witnesses. I just want us to read that, and Mr. Davis came into it as well. Mr. David Jones, my constituency has a lot of care homes, and they are largely, if not primarily, staffed by workers from overseas, many of them from the Far East. You touched on the cultural issue. It may not be correct, but I suspect that it is cultural, maybe ethical and religious reasons that are precluding a lot of those staff members from being vaccinated. In yellow, please, can it ever be right to require such staff members to be vaccinated? Can it ever be right for an employer to be allowed to discriminate against potential employees by requiring them to have a proof of vaccination before they take up the jobs? Mr. David Davis, one you heard earlier, says, first, it is illegal to require vaccination at the moment. It is illegal. You can't demand it because the law says so. OBT just changed in the adult homes through secondary legislation. We are bound, he went on, we are bound ourselves by United Nations and the European international agreements Please don't confuse with the European Union. He's talking of the Council of Europe, where we are still in the European Convention of Human Rights. What he's referring to. That is against both international and national laws. On European Convention of Human Rights, he brought out this citation, Mr. David Davis, a piece of it, he brought this out. That not the European Union, don't confuse, this is the Council of Europe that deals with human rights, European Convention of Human Rights. On COVID-19 vaccines, ethical, legal, and practical considerations, Resolution 2361, 2021 says, 731 says, ensure that citizens are informed that the vaccination is not mandatory and that no one is politically, socially, or otherwise pressured to get themselves vaccinated if they do not wish to do so themselves. 732, ensure that no one is discriminated against for not having been vaccinated due to possible health risks or not wanting to be vaccinated. A case law, that is the international piece of the instrument. How about law? Yeah, in the country, in the Court of Appeal, Civil Division, Lord Donaldson's dictum, if you please, has stood the test of time. Remember RT, who had refused medical treatment, the courts came up with this. Lord Donaldson, in that case law, said, an adult who suffers from no mental incapacity has an absolute right to choose whether to consent to medical treatment. This right of choice is not limited to decisions which others might regard as sensible, as it were. I told you I was a minister of religion. Let me close on this. There's a great fear. Those who have not, those who have, you just sense sometimes this fear amid the joy. You can sense that fear. In Isaiah 41, 10, 13 says, fear not. God says, I'm with you. Be not dismayed. I remain your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my right hand of righteousness. Oh, didn't you hear me? 13 says, for I, the Lord your God, will hold your right hand, saying to you, fear not, I will help you. My take is not whether you have been vaccinated or not, but I would like to appeal to my own heart based on this promise and invite you that by God's help, that which is determined to bring fear and division should be replaced by the promise of God that he will be with us and that he will make sure we are upheld. Not that alone, but a biblical principle that I have always with my colleagues shared. In 1 Peter chapter 3:15, the same verse in the New King James Version, but also in the Amplified Bible. It's the same verse. Let me take the bottom one. But in your heart, set Christ apart as holy and acknowledge him. Always be ready to give a logical defense to anyone who asks you to account for the hope that is in you, but do it courteously and respectfully. 3 things. During this pandemic, I'm begging you, first and foremost, realize this issue cannot just be solved by mankind. You and I should allow Christ to take center stage. And when he does, he will give us at all times the opportunity to give a logical defense of the decision that is within me without fear or favor. Don't be fearful. God says, I'm going to be with you. So when you take him to heart, you not only give your, if you have taken that job, you will give a logical defense while you have done so. If you have not taken the job, you too must be able to give without fear a logical defense, not just to shout for shouting's sake. Be persuaded by reasoning, by logic. But even both sides, when we do so, we must maintain courtesy and respect. Let mandatory vaccination or not be a means of being discourteous and disrespectful to anyone. I repeat, when Christ is at my center, the center of my heart, does not deprive me of thinking. I will think logically. But as I do so, I will not be puffed up. I will be humble. I'll be courteous. And I'll be respectful. Thank you for listening as you make your decision on the consultation asked of you by the government. Thank you. All right. Okay, thank you so much. We'll now be ready to have some of your questions or comments. I see some folk coming in already. Thank you so much. All right. Sean Thompson, I see the first question. Says, have you supported any SDA church member in getting exemption from COVID mandatory vaccination due to religious or human rights, or do you know of anyone? A quick answer, yes. Quick answer, yes. But here, let me say that each person and where they work is different. Yeah, there has been some attempts to assist, and even now, we are doing exactly that by God's grace and help. I repeat, I don't sit here claiming I have all the answers, but members must not suffer in silence. Even if I don't have anything to offer, just being there, I've been amazed. Members just love it, that they're not alone. So yes, we have attempted to help. Hi, Pastor. I received a letter last week informing me that my last day of service is, yes, indeed, I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. Pamela White, I can see your name. Yes, or the majority, but if our lead technical leader could give my details as usual, my email or my mobile, please, Pamela, if you could get in touch, we can take it from there. All I'm saying, what I found it very amazing, is that each home is dealing with our members differently. They have the same piece of legislation, but each home is honing in from a different kind of, some of them are taking a hard line, some very persuasive. But having said that, can I bring this on a more faith-based? When you have gone on your knees and prayed, trust God. Trust God. The stories in the Bible of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and many others, we're not just there, for us to get a feel-good factor. They had you and me in mind today, okay? They had you and me in mind today. So Pamela White, like many others, read those stories to reinforce the decision, helped by God. And when they prayed, you remember, or when they stood, you remember, they were not spared of going into the fiery furnace. They were not spared in going into the lion's den. But even in the lion's den, even in the fiery furnace, God showed up. It is no secret, Pamela, what God is trying to say to you. What he did then, he will do it today. Hold your own. Hold your own. Don't be intimidated. This world may want to level itself, hear of the word leveling up. Let them level with themselves, but no one should try to level up with God. I remember when we had our prayer meeting the other day, I reminded myself and reminded you, no job, no job. Just listen to this. No job, no job. Okay, down here. But he who created me, whose breath I have, if he decided to hold my breath, there will be no job, there will be no job. You didn't hear me. I'm saying he who sits above on his throne. We down here, we could be wrangling, no job, no job, no job, no job. But he above can withhold the breath. There won't be no job, there won't be no job. So when all is said and done, God will have the last saying on you. Another question. I've noticed much of, even me, what we are doing is to talk around, Can I just remind myself of Daniel again? He was carrying on, But the Bible says when the writing was signed, the law of the Medes and Persians over the stance he had taken, when he knew the signing was right, it was now law. He would be thrown in the lion's den. He didn't spend time chasing after them. He looked up. And as Daniel looked up, his God looked down and shut the lion's mouth. Don't you think the same God can shut people's mouths so that you're not hurt? Think about it. He can shut the lion's mouth, but he can't shut fellow human beings like you and me. Okay. I know, easily said than done. Some of you will be saying, oh, Pastor, I know. But hold your, and the thing is, folk, use the consultation not to frighten you, but to challenge you and give you an opportunity to witness for God. You know, if these things would not have happened, what we are going through now, some of us, it would be us not only trying, God, where are these things you said they would take place? No, you say this will take place, there will be pestilences, we don't see them. Now they are here. Thank God for them and get on with it. Get on with it. Don't be fearful. But great I am says, I'm going to be with you. Yeah. Don't be fearful. And making this presentation today, I fear nobody. All what I'm presenting are the facts out there. The platform doesn't know. What have I been saying? The premise which has put pen to paper into a law for those working in their care homes is questionable in certain quarters. It can be by convention, but because of the enormity of this thing, it's being suggested primary legislation should be not secondary. The government has gone for secondary. Who knows, this could be challenged in the courts big time. Someone can have said, could you explain how the government has got around this point to enforce secondary legislation? Oh, well, it has gotten around because a state of secretary obviously has the power just given by Parliament, like the local authority. They have some powers to make local laws, but there are areas of primary legislation which needs Parliament involvement, because that one is well scrutinized. You start from ground zero. You don't just walk backwards. No wonder you heard those two ladies complaining you are running roughshod, because secondary just means secondary. It may pass through, but the involvement of scrutiny is not the same like primary legislation. No wonder you heard from those from the beginning saying, with mandatory vaccination, it has not been given to the executive, even to the government, on its own, without full Parliament to change it. But they're arguing here, secondary or by convention or by some custom. I'm yet to look really into that. But my take, if they will really want folk to buy into what is pinning down those stuff in the old care homes. This must be sorted out. How we ended up to have a primary legislation taken through the back door of a secondary legislation to mandate vaccination. In other words, can you imagine those in the care homes, it applies. But if you're not in the care home, it doesn't apply to you. A law in the same country, one applies to one group, one doesn't apply to me because I don't work in the care home. So mandatory does not, it may catch up with me soon in some ways. I don't know where this thing is going. They've started with the older homes. But by the way, folk, if I may mention, using elderly folk to be protected, who would argue against that? Our older folk who have done so much to be where we are must be protected. The disabled must be protected. Our children, the most vulnerable, must be protected. No one should argue against that. But it's the way you go about it. It's the way you go about it. People say, hang on. That's what Dawkins was trying to say. There can be possibly a state cohesion, but you must not press a panic button, but through valid legislation. Valid. It must be valid. So the secondary legislation here we are talking about for is something you should labor, possibly ask some experts, particularly those of you who have not gone for vaccination. This could be an area of interest. As long as someone really is sympathetic and understanding where you are coming from. Because when you heard, I could have brought more, as you have heard those complaints. The law, I repeat, we are being told the current consultation must buy into what has made those in the old care homes to buy into. But now that we know what has happened to get them into, there may be someone who says, I don't mind, I'll go along with it. But there may be someone who says, hang on. No, in my consultation, I'll raise an alarm. Not that I don't want to be vaccinated, but the way possibly I'm beginning to question this was handled. At the end of the day, I'm not telling you, you go or you don't go, but you and I must be well informed. Yeah. I see someone says we need to follow in Esther's shoes, fasting and praying. And no wonder 2 weeks ago, was it 2 Sundays ago, we had a complete day on this platform for prayer. And let me appeal to my Seventh-day Adventist community. I don't know where we turn up in large numbers, but I would have expected more of our members. Let us come and look to God. Not even to look to man alone. I'm not saying people are not important. Please don't get me wrong. People need people. We're not islands by ourselves. People need people. But when all is said and done, we all must look up. Whence cometh my help? Psalmist said, my help comes from the Lord. Why? Because he created the heavens and the earth. He neither sleeps nor slumbers. Every human being will be going to sleep. Even those who work in the NHS, their time shifts, someone has to sleep. But my God operates 24/7. He neither sleeps. Can you imagine the day God went to sleep? Can you ever imagine even when he dozed, we'll all be done? I'm glad God does not sleep nor doze. Yes, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Yeah, so when all the talking around us, the talking, Look up. Look up. And the end of that psalm, he says, this God will see you're going in and you're coming out. Someone there, 11th of November, you have been told you can't go back to your job. It's now being said down here, but someone up there will determine you're going in and you're going out and beyond. Yes, he will. Yes, he will. You know, Daniel went into the lion's den. Did he stay there? No, he didn't. He came out of it and continued. Daniel continued under Cyrus, Darius, and the same job. He continued the same job. You didn't hear me. I'm saying Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. The same law and the same king who threw him there took him out there and offered him a top job. That story is not for us to wrangle about or just, it was written with you and me in mind on the 19th of September, 2021. God had you and me in mind. 11th, who knows we'll live to end of this week, even tomorrow. No wonder we should not just be getting ready, but to remain in a state of readiness, to live ready. Seventh-day Adventists, we should stop getting ready now. Can you imagine going for some journey? You start getting ready. You are getting ready. 2 weeks getting ready. 2 days later getting ready. No, there comes a time I'm now ready. I've packed up my suitcase. I'm going to the airport. I'm ready. Let us stop getting ready and live ready for takeoff. Why? Because God says so. We know not the day nor the hour. So other than, if you just listened to some of the things spoken in Parliament, you'd want, really? In fact, what I showed you is something to blow your mind. They almost blew mine. But I was grateful to find them. That, by the way, things I've always suspected are not just second guess work. So thank you for having said all this. Let us pray for one another. But let me stop on this premise. Don't be afraid. Don't be fearful. Remain courteous and respectful. Don't allow COVID-19 vaccine jab to be divisive at all levels. At all levels. I thought this was time for Q&A. You can continue Q&A, but I'm persuaded that we need to live ready. If you have a question, you may bring it now, but I'm persuaded that we live ready. The days ahead of us will be real. Any question?
Yes, I have questions in the chat, Pastor, but they've just been ignored.
No, I've not seen them. I'm talking because I've not seen them. I'm being forwarded the questions. All right. Or just ask that question. I've not seen it from my side. My apologies. You can ask. You can ask. My apologies for real. I've not seen the question. Or can someone in the technical room, please, can you bring forward that question? Hello? Let's see, what question is that? Any questions in the chat room, I'm told? Oh, can you repeat that question for me, please, sir? My apologies.
Okay.
My apologies. Very sincere
Okay.
apology.
I have a couple of questions here. I was wondering, have we as a church written the government making our position clear on mandatory vaccine?
Yes. You will,
okay.
very quick one. You'll find, I can send you the website. We have a full article of our position on mandatory. I've got my article, and it was accepted by the Human Rights of the UK Parliament. So it's in the UK Parliament for reference. Yes.
Okay. Also, has the government replied to the church directly with a response to the letter we've sent to them?
The what?
I'm trying to understand, if we have written
Right.
the government on our position of mandatory vaccination,
Right.
has the government responded directly to us as a church, and what did they say? They have responded.
No, they have not responded directly, but what they normally do is to acknowledge your submission, and it is put on website as a point of reference for Parliament.
Okay. Okay. So would I be able to read your letter that you sent?
Yeah, I will send you, and you'll find it on the UK Parliament website. I will send it to you. But also it is at the SEC office, SEC website, yeah.
Thank you very much, Pastor.
Thank you. But here again, my apologies. I didn't see any question, so I was just going through. My apologies, sincerely. And possibly now that we have come to my end, I don't know your name. You could close with a word of prayer, my brother. If there are no more other questions, just commend us to God, each one of us. No one knows it all. We are in this thing together. We sing or sink or swim, but God is with us. So my brother, what is your name again?
Sean Thompson.
Oh, Brother Thompson, please, thank you. If you could pray for us and commend us to God.
Okay.
Shall I invite all those, please, to bow your heads. Please.
Let's pray. Eternal Father in heaven, we come before you in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ of Nazareth.
Yes, Lord.
As you look down upon your children in this sinful, sick, dark world, you have walked here and you have been through all what we're going through. At times, Lord, we can be fearful. We can suffer from anxiety.
Yes.
Sometimes we have lack of faith. You can see the end from the beginning. Help us to really understand what your desire for us is, and that this life is just a temporal life until we meet in eternity.
Indeed, Lord.
But at the same time, Lord, you've told us to occupy until you come. So give us the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to navigate our everyday lives as fathers, mothers, with so many responsibilities and deadlines and challenges and mountains to climb. Lord, you can see exactly what's going on.
Indeed, oh God.
I pray that you would empower your church, empower our leaders, give our leaders a bit more backbone to stand for what is right,
Indeed, oh God.
even though the heavens fall. And so help us as a church, our church leaders, and we as members, be faithful even unto death.
Indeed.
My prayer in Jesus' name.
In Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, brothers. And thank you, everyone, for making it possible. Be in touch. If you have my details, we can always share. As I said, I don't have to have all the answer, but we can pray. We can just see what best can be done in the second. But don't suffer in silence. Don't suffer. God bless.
Thank you, Pastor.
God bless my sister.
God bless you too. May God bless each and every one.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you very much.
God bless. God bless.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.